An interesting byproduct of me doing the videos as I do is I receive a whole lot of questions from many people about this topic. And probably one of the most common questions is, if a narcissist comes along and says that they want to change, they want to do better, how do I know that their comment is believable? I mean, can narcissists really change? And I know I've talked about this in other videos, but I want to address this a little bit more specifically today. Let's keep in mind that narcissism is a pattern on a spectrum. And there's some who are all the way down to the far end of that spectrum where we'd call it NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, to where, and there's a malignancy, etc., that goes with it, that it's just not going to happen. It's just so deeply embedded. It's so much a part of their identity that they are what they are and they're not going to change. And usually they're not the people who are making a comment such as this. But then there's some people who may not be quite that far down the spectrum, but it's in them. And there's quite a bit of that selfishness and that craving for control. And something can happen, and more often than not, there's a crisis situation that comes along, or maybe they've been exposed for telling lies or cheating, or something has fallen apart in their relationships or business dealings, and they finally will say, things need to be different. I get it. I understand that. When those kind of individuals will make that kind of statement, is that something that you can just go along with? And frankly, it's going to take some time before you really know if the adjustment that they say they want to make is in fact the real deal. Now, I'm going to pinpoint 5 different indicators that I watch for, and then actually there are probably a few more, excuse me, but and then I want to identify one really, really large ingredient that is going to be a part of the indication that perhaps the change desire is in fact believable. Now, the first thing that we want to watch for to understand if that person is serious about changing is the willingness that they would have to receive your input about them. One of the defining features of narcissism is an unwillingness to receive input from other individuals, and that's kind of an outflow of their lack of empathy for others. But if they actually will say something like, I want to know how you feel, or I want to know why you've arrived at these interpretations, or tell me what your perceptions are and help me know what it is that you need me to know, okay, that's a good sign. And then a second indicator goes right along with that. Then I'm going to be interested to see if that narcissistic individual is willing to name and claim the issues on the inside of themselves that are in fact in need of adjustment. See, it's one thing for them to say in a broad sense, yeah, I know things need to be different. That doesn't really impress me. But if they can say, I'm very aware that I have a problem with criticism, or I know that many individuals have told me how controlling I am, and that's something I really need to take a hard look at. Or behind the scenes, I realize I have some insecurities and it comes through. Or there's an attitude of entitlement that many times I can engage with. If they're going to say some things like that, and others like, I know that I tend to be very dismissive, and they can be specific about that, that's a good sign, because they're actually just not talking about broad generalities. Now, another thing, and this kind of goes right along with it, and this is number 3, another indicator is I want to see that they're willing to take ownership of their deeper history. It's interesting for them to look back into their family of origin or the various associates that they've had through the years. You want to know that they have some insight with the way that they do relationships and why they do things the way they do, and they're willing to ask some of the why things. You want to know that they have insight regarding the pain that they've carried on the inside, but also the pain that they've created in other individuals. In other words, I want to know that the person is willing to say, this is my story. And many times a really good indicator would be if they were to say, and I'm willing to go to counseling. And I'm willing to unpack this with some people because I really want to know this. When they take ownership of their history, that tends to be a good sign. Now, a fourth ingredient, and this is an important one too. In fact, it's really important. You especially want to know that the narcissist who says they want to change is willing to acknowledge the fear that they live with. You remember, one of the things that I mention very often is how the narcissist tends to construct a false self. And it's their way of saying, I can't afford to let people know the real me. They hate to be vulnerable. They need to go ahead and say, I know that I do have this vulnerability that scares me to death. And I'm gonna just go ahead and acknowledge my fears. It's one thing to say I have anger, I have control, but you know that a person is truly getting to the core of the matter when they say, and I have fears that tend to drive me, here's what it is. And then a fifth primary indicator that I watch for is their understanding of your need to feel free. Now, let's keep in mind that an identifying feature of narcissism is their need to control, and they like to control you. And so when that adjusting person is saying, well, you know what? First and foremost, I need to drop the illusion that I can or should control you. I want to let go of that. And I need you to know that I want you to feel free to be what you are. I want you to feel free to set your priorities and have your feelings and your interpretations. Narcissists like the idea of themselves being free, but they don't like other people being free. And so if an individual can go in this path, that would be a good indicator. Now, just kind of shifting a little bit, there's certain things I'm going to watch for that tells me we're going in the wrong direction. For example, that person may have said, I want to change, but in not too far down the road, if you feel that they're becoming impatient or they start going back to their stubborn or critical kinds of ways, the crisis is now kind of abating, and then they can become too quick to say, well, have you changed your mind about me? And they want to force closeness and they want to force agreement. Usually that's an indicator that they weren't really all that serious, or let's say if they start minimizing some of your concerns and they say, well, it's not as bad as you've been telling me it is, then those are not good indicators. So just kind of watch for that. Now, I mentioned there's one really large ingredient that really needs to be in place over a period of time for you to know if a narcissist change indicator is in fact believable. And that is the characteristic of consistency. It's one thing for a person to say, I want to do some things different, and then occasionally they do the things that are different. I don't want occasional change. I want consistent change. For example, I want consistent, not occasional, patience from that person. I want consistent, not occasional focus on other individuals' feelings and needs. I want consistent, not occasional courtesy. I want consistent, not occasional encouragement, as opposed to criticism. I want a consistent, not occasional willingness to be vulnerable. It's an ongoing thing. I want consistent, not occasional admission of personal needs and hurts. Go ahead and make that a part of the way you do life. I want a consistent, not occasional pleasantness. I want consistent, not occasional consideration. I want consistent, not occasional listening. I want consistent, not occasional self-restraint. I want consistent, not occasional steadiness in emotions. And I want consistent, not occasional goodness to be there. When the ingredients are in place, when the insight and the awareness and the listening and the discussion is there, that's good. But consistency, above all, is the number one thing that I'm going to be watching for that tells me maybe we're going to go somewhere. And we're not talking about consistent over a 4 or 5 week period of time. We're talking about consistency between now and my last day on earth. Now, obviously, none of us are going to be so perfect and so steady that we never make mistakes. So I'm not requiring perfection, but I'm wanting to have that real steady, consistent mindset that says, I'm in this for the long haul. I strongly suspect that some of you know some people who are in a crisis situation and they say they need to be different. And then once the crisis is done, it's right back to the same old patterns. Or a year goes by and it's like, well, have you noticed that I'm different? And then they start bargaining with themselves and they start bringing back in some of the old behavior that got them in the problem in the first place. That tells me that it was only a crisis-driven kind of a decision and it wasn't the real thing. We need to make sure that we're in this for whatever time it takes, years, even decades. Then we know that a real transformation is taking place. So can a narcissist change? A lot of them don't, but some can. Now, one final thought, and that is, if you're the person who's asking or hoping that that other person is going to make some change, it would be the height of hypocrisy if you don't also say, you know what, as long as we're on the subject, I know I have my issues too that I need to make adjustments in. So I'm hoping you can have this same sense of openness and honesty and vulnerability as a modeling so that that narcissistic or hopefully formerly narcissistic person can see what healthy living looks like. Be the change that you want that other person to also have. In other words, set a good example. So I hope that videos such as this will stimulate you to good thinking. I hope it gives you a frame of reference to draw upon. If you've not hit the subscribe button yet, we invite you to go beneath and hit the subscribe button. Notice you know that we have a new website that I would invite you to look onto. We actually have an email list that we collect there, and it'll allow you to be have availabilities to bonus videos and articles, etc. It's www.survivingnarcissism.tv. If you have a need for online counseling and you want somebody that can help you unpack all of this that we're talking about, we have a link that will help you out there where people are waiting for you. And then in addition, we have my online workshops and my books and coffee mugs. So know that I'm wanting you to be a thinker. I'm wanting for you to have a mind awake. And as you do so, then you're not going to get caught off guard. And I'm hoping you're going to learn that with that awakened mind, there can be new and healthier patterns waiting for you that are going to carry you into your future. And as you do that, I want to just say thank you for allowing me to be a part of that journey with you. Now, all of that said, I wish for you steadiness. I wish for you a calm, reasoned mind. I wish for you peace.